Hey guys, so I stumbled upon this article in Drovers. It's a beef industry site. It's written by Dan Murphy is his name. And I think it's really interesting to read industry stuff when you can. And a lot of stuff is available. There are lots of sites like this, cattle and dairy and whatnot, that you can just read. And sometimes they post stuff about veganism, about animal rights and whatnot. And it's really interesting to see what they have to say about the vegan message. And I thought this article in particular was very interesting. I think I said interesting a lot. I think I should learn some new words. So it's clear that a lot of these people just don't understand veganism at all, which is not surprising. I'm sure they don't want to understand it, right? They don't want to look too deeply into this. They have obvious reasons not to, financial reasons, even, I guess, what would you call it? Cultural type reasons. You know, a lot of these people have grown up in the industry, right? Like their parents did it and they grew up, doing it. There are a lot of reasons, personal reasons why these people would not want to learn much about veganism, right? But it's really interesting reading this. Oh, there's interesting again. It's really interesting reading this article. He seems to kind of, I guess, deny that there's any sort of legitimate reason, ethical reason for veganism that's coming from just like normal everyday people, right? We're all just wackadoo weirdos, of course. And this is really interesting, he seems to think that there's some sort of like profit motive behind attacking the animal agriculture industry. With many of the alternative categories competing with conventional food products, the approach is not to promote the benefits of organic or vegetarian, but rather spend time and money attacking mainstream producers, processors, and marketers. So I have no idea what he's talking about here. I found this really confusing. I can't even think of one ad from a plant-based company that uses this kind of tactic in their ads, targeting producers, processors, or marketers. I looked at a bunch of different ads. I looked at from Beyond Meat to Silk, a bunch of companies, and I didn't see any of that. It's exactly what you would expect in a commercial, right? It's like the feel-good marketing that he talks about before in the article, what you would normally see. Silk's talking about, hey, we have more calcium. They're just talking about the benefits of their products. Even the supposed great example that he gives, this is really funny, but it doesn't come from a plant-based company. It comes from a vegan activist group called Go Vegan World. Duh. That's why there are activists advocating for veganism and against animal agriculture. It is inherently negative. That's why we're vegan. Anyway, that was super weird. But even more interesting to me is Murphy's comments here, where he's talking about how to respond or how not to respond to vegans. Of course, the go-to strategy for veganistas, that's all right, is demonizing all activities involving animals. Consider the comments of Sandra Higgins, Go Vegan World's campaign director and the founder of the Eden Farmed Animal Sanctuary, Ireland. We imagine that non-human lives hardly matter at all. We live as though our difference from other species entitles us to use them and that they exist for our benefit. This view is not only inaccurate, it is unethical. Nobody wants their children to be the property of someone else. So anybody who is not vegan is participating in violence that directly contradicts the values that we all claim to have. How can you refute that statement? Answer, you don't. Instead, the industry needs to stay focused on promoting animal well-being and educating consumers about sustainable food production, environmental stewardship, and the importance of food security and agricultural sustainability. So basically, Murphy is arguing that the meat industry should not use negative press to counteract vegans, to fight the vegan message, that this is not an effective way at creating a positive connection between potential consumers and animal products. So instead, they need to focus on the positives of animal agriculture, like sustainability. If he's right about the harms of using negative press, and I think he probably is, then the meat industry is fucked. They're fucked because you can't argue for sustainability. You can't argue that animal agriculture is sustainable without just appealing to pseudoscience, without lying. Thermodynamics makes it impossible for meat to be a genuinely sustainable source of food for people. Animals are not perfect converters of energy, and the vast majority do not exclusively graze, nor is grazing land only suitable for grazing. And for animals like cows that use enteric fermentation, it's even worse because of greenhouse gas output. Obviously, not all vegans are good environmentalists either, but the saying that there's no such thing as a meat-eating environmentalist is pretty credible, at least for beef. And food security, like by feeding our grains to animals and getting less food as a result? Really? There is one viable position that Murphy advocates for, promoting animal well-being, but I get the sense that his idea of animal well-being and mine are vastly different. Manually milked dairy cows bred for health and happiness rather than production, who stay with their calves and live out their full lives. The result would be insanely more expensive products, and in order to mitigate the environmental impact, the industry would have to shrink dramatically and do extra carbon capture too. But again, this is obviously nothing like what the animal agriculture industry is talking about when they talk about animal well-being. And they've made it pretty clear that well-being, that the health and happiness of these animals is nowhere near top priority for them. Final thing, maybe, I'm not sure actually. The demographic that buys into the no animals never ever is but a thin slice of the adult population, about the same percentage of voters who pull the lever for the Green Party in national elections here in the States. Those born-again veggies aren't going to be persuaded that the philosophy of veganism has serious problems. I really love the focus on, vegans as small, we're a really small group, we're inconsequential, we're really silly. He keeps calling us, what did he call us, Veganistas and born-again veggies. Of course, it's not surprising they have to do that, because what is the alternative? The alternative is recognizing that, yeah, we're small, but we're growing, that more and more and more people are realizing that they do care about sustainability, that they do care about animal welfare, and they are looking for actual sustainable options and actual animal-friendly options. That's terrifying. If you are in this industry, if you are in the meat and the animal ag industry, that's devastating. It's just so interesting to watch someone, to read from someone, or watch them speaking, whatever, just to see people who are so obviously on the wrong side of history, and they just can't see it. They won't see it. Actually, I think the last thing I'll say is, I was reading some of the comments about where he says, how can you refute that statement? Answer, you don't. And a lot of the comments on the article were just like, you admitted it. You can't even counter, the vegan message. Like, you're a fraud. Get out of here. I don't know if anyone actually called him a fraud, but that would be funny. It's so important to realize who might be reading your stuff. If we have a blog or something, or we put out a book, or we're just writing like in public, and we just you get into this habit of just assuming that only vegans are reading your stuff or watching your videos or whatever. But if it's out there in public, that's not true. Other people are finding this. And if you have a habit of maybe glossing over something because you would just assume that everyone knows it, and I do this all the time too with my videos, I'm absolutely sure that I do. Someone who doesn't know may watch that and go, oh, you won't talk about it because you're wrong, or something like that. Am I making any sense there? So I think we do need to be careful, again, if we are putting stuff out there in public, to make sure that we are explaining it to some degree, not just assuming that our audience is vegan only and like glossing over things and like, oh, well, you get this. That's ultimately what this comes down to, I think. He's writing this for people who already agree with him, right? Like, he's not writing this for anyone else. When he says answer, you don't, like, the people who are reading it understand what he's saying, right? And I'm sure if you were to say to him, oh, because you can't counter it, he would go, well, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying the argument is stupid. It's like emotional and childish. I'm sure some of you have heard, particularly from people, I think, within the industry or were raised on a farm, they really do think of us as veganistas, right? As born-again veggies. They really do think of us as super childish, as not able to cope with the reality of food, the world, essentially, that we can't handle the stuff that just needs to get done, right? And these guys are they're men and they can handle it. I mean, there are some women too, but let's be real. It mostly is a like kind of macho bullshit type thing. And then he says later in the article, vegans just don't, what does he say? Something like they just, hold on, I need to find it. Oh yeah, I already read it. Those born again veggies aren't going to be persuaded that the philosophy of veganism has serious problems, right? And so of course, again, a vegan reading this is like, well, what are the serious problems? You won't even mention them because they don't exist. And it's like, no, I'm sure he could list the serious problems that he believes that veganism has, but he's not going to list it here because he's writing this for people who already agree with him, right? And he's not thinking that vegans are going to be reading this, right? And making a video about it on their vegan channel. I don't know where I was going with that really. I guess just to say that we should be more aware about stuff we put out in public. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comments and questions down below. If you want to subscribe, that's super cool. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/unnaturalvegan. Thanks again, and I will have a new video soon.